Hi everyone, my name is Sophie and this presentation is called Grounded in Strengths, and I think the name captures what I'm trying to do here pretty well. Today I'm going to walk you through a proposed positive psychology intervention for vaping in young Australians aged 12 to 24. I'll cover the issue itself, the two positive psychology principles I've chosen, how the intervention would actually work in practice, and I'll be upfront about the limitations involved in this kind of intervention as well. Alrighty, so let's talk about the issue itself and why it is extremely important in today's society. Vaping among young Australians has grown at a pretty alarming rate, and according to the AIHW, around 1 in 6 15 to 17-year-olds have tried vaping, and the Cancer Council has documented that roughly 400% of an increase in youth vaping has occurred since 2019. I think this shows that this is not just a small trend, and it is sort of a shift in how an entire generation is now engaging in nicotine. What makes this pretty particularly concerning is the downstream risk. So research by Sonji and colleagues found that young people who vape are around 3 times more likely to go on to smoke cigarettes. So we're not just looking at vaping as an isolated behavior, it's sort of looking at it as kind of a gateway into the more traditional cigarette smoking. Now, there are existing approaches out there, school-based education programs, community campaigns, and clinics, but they mostly take a here is what you should not do approach, and they are deficit-focused. They don't really do a great job of building the internal skills and self-awareness that young people actually resist social pressure and manage the emotions that often drive vaping in the first place. So this gap is kind of exactly where I think positive psychology can step in. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at the two positive psychology principles that I've chosen: mindfulness and signature strengths. I don't want to explain why I think that pairing them makes sense for this particular issue. Starting with mindfulness. The core idea is about developing awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without immediately reacting to them. For a young person who reaches for their vape when they're stressed or bored, that pause, that moment of noticing, can be really powerful. Research by Ken and colleagues support this, showing that mindfulness improves emotional regulation and reduces psychological distress. And Brewer's work specifically linking mindfulness to reduction in craving-driven behavior. The tool that I'm recommending here is the Smiling Mind app, which I briefly spoke about in my previous assignment. It's free, it was developed in Australia, and it's already in schools, and it's designed specifically for young people. Accessibility matters a lot when you're designing something that actually needs to reach teenagers, and Smiling Mind really ticks that box. Now, on its own, mindfulness tells you to notice what you're feeling. Signature strengths give you somewhere to go with that awareness. The VIA character strengths framework helps people identify what they're genuinely good at, things like creativity, curiosity, bravery, and then use those strengths intentionally. Park and colleagues found that doing this meaningfully increased well-being and decreased depressive symptoms with effects that lasted over time. Together, these two approaches complement each other really well. Mindfulness creates a space and strengths give the direction. So what does this actually look like in practice? The program is called Grounded, which I think fits well given that we're grounding both the mindfulness practice and the strengths work in a real day-to-day life. Grounded is an 8-week group program for young Australians aged 14 to 24, delivered in schools and youth mental settings. Each week involves a 60-minute facilitated session, and between sessions, participants do a short daily mindfulness practice using the Smiling Mind app. Just 10 minutes, nothing overwhelming. The structure breaks down into 3 phases. The first 3 weeks focus on mindfulness and understanding cravings, helping participants notice the emotional triggers behind their vaping without immediately acting on them. Where weeks 4 through to 6 shift to signature strengths, where participants complete the VIA survey to identify their top strengths and work on applying those strengths in their daily lives in new ways. The final 2 weeks are about integration, building a personal relapse prevention plan, reflecting on progress, and supporting each other through a structured peer component. The logic behind pairing these two is pretty straightforward. Mindfulness gives young people a moment of awareness before they act, and strengths give them something meaningful to redirect that energy toward. It's not just about stopping vaping, it's also about building an identity that does not need it. And these two positive psychology frameworks really assist with that. Now, no intervention is perfect, and I think it's worth being upfront about where the gaps are in this one. The first is the evidence base. Most of the research on mindfulness and signature strengths has been done with adult populations. The science is genuinely promising, but we have less direct evidence for this combined approach specifically with adolescents. That is something that would need to be addressed through proper evaluation as the program runs. Second, cultural fit. Both the Smiling Mind app and the VIA Strengths Framework come from Western psychology traditions, where if we are serious about reaching all young Australians, including our First Nations communities, culturally diverse young people, then the program needs to be co-designed with these communities rather than just adapting it specifically. Co-design really allows for all voices in the room and for us to know, what it's like in the life of young people at the time. Third, of course, is, a classic, the cost and access. So running a facilitator-led 8-week program in schools requires real investment. Schools with fewer resources, particularly in rural areas or lower SES communities, are exactly where the need is greatest and infrastructure is at least likely to exist. And finally, of course, is engagement. So getting teenagers to show up for 8 weeks takes real effort. Group settings can feel vulnerable, and dropout is a known challenge in youth programs. The program design, though, would need to account for that through flexible delivery options and skilled facilitation, and I think importantly, embedding this in the school system. But these are not reasons that we should abandon this idea, and they are things that just need to be built into the planning from the start. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and here's just the references of the research on this slide here. Thank you so much.